Some of these cases are so unbelievable that you just may think that they are from a movie script rather than real life. But each and every one of them is 100% true. Our first case is shocking and complicated with more twists than you will ever see coming. This is not your typical murder. It is more than just one tragedy, but many wrapped up together in almost an unbelievable way. Sharon Marshall is at the center of this story. And when she was a teenager, she had the entire world open to her. She was reportedly a lieutenant for ROTC and one of the best and brightest students in her class. An undeniable, intelligent young woman with a kind heart to match. Upon Sharon graduating high school in 1986 from Forest Park, Georgia, she earned a full-ride scholarship to Georgia Institute of Technology with the plans of studying aerospace engineering so that she could fulfill her dream of working at NASA. And despite this incredible opportunity, Sharon never went to college as she was harboring a secret. Sharon was pregnant during the final months of high school by her boyfriend, who never actually found out that she was pregnant. She gave birth and allowed for a wealthy couple from Texas to adopt her baby boy. However, this pregnancy had shaken up her life plans, and at one point, she apparently even tried unsuccessfully to run away with her boyfriend. After losing her chance to attend college, Sharon ended up moving to Tampa, Florida, for a new start with a man named Franklin Floyd. Despite having moved with Frank, Sharon started to date other men, and she soon became pregnant once again. She never told the father about this pregnancy. This time, however, she chose to keep her child and raise that baby with Frank. Sharon gave birth to her son, Michael Marshall, in 1988. Frank and Sharon had a very complicated relationship. It wasn't quite clear if it was romantic or not, but the two did live together and both provided for Sharon's son, Michael. Frank worked as a painter, but he frequently suffered from back pain, so he rarely actually had a usual job. Because of this, Sharon became an exotic dancer to provide for them, but they also began to receive welfare checks to survive. Her co-workers thought that Sharon was kind and friendly, but she was especially close to an 18-year-old co-worker named Cheryl. Despite the women's friendship, Frank and Cheryl were known to have frequent disagreements. There were reports that the two of them may have been involved in a brief relationship. On the weekend in 1989, Frank, Sharon, and Cheryl went on a boating trip together where a fight broke out between Cheryl and Frank. Following the argument, Cheryl allegedly reported Sharon to the social services for misrepresenting her true income as an exotic dancer. Sharon had been hiding some of the money she made to still be able to get the checks from the government. But Cheryl called meant that Sharon would no longer qualify for welfare aid. And enraged by Cheryl's actions, Frank went to the club where Sharon and Cheryl worked and confronted her just outside of the business. Now, witnesses reported that Frank actually punched Cheryl in the face during the altercation. Shortly after, Cheryl left her father's house to travel and stay with a friend, but when she never called her father to tell him that she had arrived, he reported her missing. Her abandoned Chevrolet was discovered at an airport, and an investigation ensued to find the missing woman. Both Frank and Sharon were seen as persons of interest for years, but no evidence ever arose in connection to Cheryl's disappearance. The two quickly packed and left the area. Frank and Sharon ended up getting married in 1989, and Frank claimed it was to give Sharon's son his family name to belong to. Though the couple frequently went by different aliases, they ended up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Sharon once again started working as an exotic dancer. Sharon easily made friends everywhere the couple went, but no one seemed to like Frank, as he was aggressive and unpleasant. Reportedly, Frank once again got into a fight with another dancer named that Sharon worked with. He responded with, "If she ever left, I'll kill her." Little did Frank know that Sharon was making plans to leave, was trying to figure everything out as she worked at this club. Allegedly, Sharon would have left Frank earlier, but she was afraid of what he would do to her son, Michael, before she was able to leave that relationship. Sharon was a victim of a sudden accident. She was found unconscious by a highway, and it appeared as though she had been a victim of a hit and run. Frank claimed that he was asleep at the time of the incident. Though rushed to the hospital, Sharon never regained consciousness. Her friends came from the club, who came to visit her where she was recovering, and many claimed that she was getting better. But Frank soon banned them from seeing her without explanation. 5 days after the incident, Sharon died from her injuries. But many were suspicious of Frank's strange actions, especially since Sharon seemed to be recovering before. The doctor was also suspicious, and based off of old bruises he noticed on her body, he classified her death as a homicide, and even said that the head injury that killed Sharon may not have been caused by a vehicle. Though no one could prove that Frank had been the one that ran over Sharon, or that he had possibly killed her while in the hospital, many came to that same conclusion, especially when co-workers had been the ones to pay for her headstone rather than Frank. Frank soon contacted the life insurance company because he had an $80,000 claim out on her that he only put on her a few months prior to her death. The problem was that Frank frequently used aliases, so the social security number that he provided never matched his name. After a few tries, he finally provided his real name. And that is when all the lies began to unravel. And it turned out that he had quite the criminal history. When Frank was 19, he was convicted of abducting and assaulting a 4-year-old girl, which resulted in him being sentenced to serve 1 to 20 years in prison. However, he escaped the mental hospital, where he was first placed by stealing a vehicle. Frank's shocking story was only beginning at that day. After he escaped, he robbed a bank and was subsequently captured again. And in 1972, Frank was released, but almost immediately he tried to abduct a woman from a gas station and was once again arrested. This time, however, he paid his bail, but skipped his court date. A federal warrant was issued for his arrest, but he quickly vanished and began using fake names while on the run. That is until he finally had to give up his real name to the life insurance company. Frank attempted to flee from authorities, but he was soon captured in Georgia and placed in prison to finally serve his sentence. For the friends of Sharon, they felt that Frank's arrest was a way to serve justice to her untimely death. During this time, Frank had reportedly given Michael to social services before he went on the run, and Michael was soon put into foster care system where he would be placed with a loving family. However, everyone was shocked by the little boy's behavior, as he appeared to be nonverbal and would only scream and moan to communicate. Frank insisted he was Michael's father, so the child was frequently brought to visit him while he was incarcerated. When Michael showed resistance to the visit with Frank, a DNA test was eventually performed, even though Frank initially resisted. It was discovered that despite what Frank said, Michael was not his biological child, and so the visits were stopped. But this shocking story doesn't end here. When Frank was finally released from prison in September of 1994 after serving 4 years, he started to stalk Michael and his foster parents in Oklahoma. He knew he would never be given custody of the child, so he had devised a plan to take him. And on September 12th, 1994, Frank showed up at Michael's elementary school and demanded to see the principal. When he wasn't allowed to take Michael, Frank pulled out a gun and threatened Davis. Michael was finally collected, all without alerting anyone at the school. And Frank forced the principal under gunpoint to take the two of them to an area a few miles away from the school grounds. Frank was found in Louisville, Kentucky, and was arrested. But there was no sign of Michael. Even after extensive searches, there was no trace of what had happened to the little boy. In 1995, a skeletal remain were found covered in vines. Purchased the truck at an auction, and inside he found a large envelope filled with 97 photos depicting a woman who had been beaten and bound. The truck had once been in possession of Frank Floyd, who had stolen it while he was passing through the area in 1994. The photos were compared to the unidentified remains, and a wound on the photograph, the woman's cheek bone, matched one that was recovered from the skull. The skeleton was soon named to be Cheryl. Frank was convicted for kidnapping Michael, who still hadn't been found but was classified as missing. And he was subsequently sentenced for 52 years. He then went on trial for the murder of Cheryl, where he had been found guilty and sentenced to the death penalty. The photos uncovered in the truck revealed something else even more shocking, bringing to light another twist to this case. The pictures also showed Frank assaulting a young girl, but these images were much older than the ones of Cheryl. A search began to find the identity of the girl. This is where the case took an alarming turn. It wasn't until 2014 that Sharon's true identity was officially uncovered to find the truth about Sharon and the pictures. We have to go back. After being released from prison and while he was on the run for attempted abduction, Frank got married in the mid-1970s to Sandy Chipman. At that time, he had used an alias of Brandon Williams, so Sandy hadn't known who he really was. The marriage was far from romantic, tying the knot at the truck stop. Sandy had 4 kids at the time. She herself didn't have the cleanest record, so she left her kids with Frank in Frank's care when she had to spend 30 days in jail after being caught for writing bad checks. When Sandy was finally released from prison, she found that her house was empty and her children were gone. It appeared that Frank had taken them and moved. It took Sandy years to find out where her children had ended up, but she eventually found 2 of her daughters, Allison and Amy, living in a social service group. Sandy couldn't locate her eldest daughter, Susan, or her son, Philip. Her son was eventually found when he was a grown man. Philip came forward and had DNA tested to reveal that he was related. Frank had put him up for adoption. But what happened to Sandy's eldest is even more shocking. Sharon Marshall's real name was Susan. And she was the daughter of Sandy Chipman. In a truly alarming twist, Frank had taken Sandy's children and split them up over different social service groups, but raised Susan as his own daughter. It turns out that Sharon had been kidnapped as a child by Frank. Her own stepfather, who raised her, frequently assaulted her, later married her when she was an adult, possibly killed her, and then kidnapped her child after she died. Frank is still alive, awaiting his penalty for Cheryl's murder on death row.